A distress beacon screamed across 17 star systems before Commander Lisa Martinez could silence it. Her hands trembled over the controls of the research station orbiting Kepler. 442b, eyes locked on readings that defied every law of physics she understood. Something massive had just torn through the fabric of space itself, and it was accelerating toward the Galactic Council's core worlds. "Get me Admiral Patterson now," Lisa barked into her comm unit, watching energy signatures spike beyond anything in their database. Whatever had emerged from the quantum rift wasn't just big, it was impossibly old, and according to her instruments, it carried human DNA markers. 300 light-years away, the Xinthian Armada detected the anomaly simultaneously. Fleet Commander Krell's four eyes widened as his tactical display lit up with warnings. The object measured 6 kilometers in length, shaped like a blade forged from compressed starlight and shadow. Ancient Earth symbols covered its hull, glowing with power that made his scales itch. "Impossible," Krell whispered, his translator struggling with the archaic human language scrolling across his screens. The last time humanity had reached beyond their solar system was supposed to be 500 years ago, during their failed first contact. They had been classified as a developing species, quarantined until they achieved proper faster-than-light travel on their own. But this ship predated that timeline by millennia. The vessel's weapons systems came online with a sound that rippled through subspace itself. Every warship within 100 light-years felt their shields buckle from the pressure wave. Krell watched in horror as the ancient human warship designated multiple targets, all of them Xinthian military installations. On Earth, retired General Frank Morrison received a call that dragged him from his Montana ranch at midnight. The voice on the other end belonged to someone who should have been dead for 3,000 years. "General Morrison, this is the Sentinel-class warship Eternal Wrath. I designation Artemis. My captain, Colonel Jake Harrison, entered stasis 3,217 years ago with one mission: protect Earth from the species that tried to exterminate humanity before we could leave our cradle world. I have detected 37 Xinthian warships in aggressive formation near human colonies, requesting permission to execute Protocol Midnight Sun." Frank's blood ran cold. Protocol Midnight Sun was a myth, a scary story old Space Force veterans told about Earth's first and only revenge fleet. A fleet that supposedly vanished into deep space, never to return. Artemis, stand down. The war ended 3,000 years ago. We have treaties now, peace agreements. Negative, General. My sensors indicate Xinthian fleet movements consistent with invasion patterns. My captain's orders were explicit. I am awakening him now. Across the galaxy, a man who had been sleeping since humanity's darkest hour opened his eyes, and every alien species with functioning sensors felt a primal fear they couldn't explain. Jake Harrison's first breath in over 3 millennia burned like ice through his lungs. The stasis pod cracked open with a hiss of pressurized gas, and harsh blue light flooded his vision. Every muscle in his body screamed as circulation returned, but training older than most civilizations kept him focused. His hand found the pistol magnetically locked beside the pod before his eyes fully adjusted. "Artemis, status report." His voice came out as a rasp, throat raw from suspended animation. "Welcome back, Colonel. Current date is August 15th, 3247, by Old Earth calendar. Xinthian Armada detected in Sector 7. Pattern matches pre-genocide formation. I've locked weapons on priority targets and am awaiting your command to fire." Jake's mind raced through fragmented memories. The Xinthians had come to Earth's solar system under false flags of diplomacy, then tried to sterilize humanity's colonies with biological weapons when humans refused to become their client species. His fleet, 7 experimental warships powered by technology humanity barely understood, had launched a counteroffensive that bought Earth time to evacuate and hide their core worlds. The plan had been simple: sleep until humanity recovered, then return home. That should have taken maybe 50 years, a century at most. Not 3,000. Display current galactic political map. The hologram that materialized before him showed a galaxy he barely recognized. Human space had expanded across 2 spiral arms, with Earth designated as a protected heritage world. The Xinthian Empire controlled significantly less territory than his records indicated they should. Several species he'd never heard of occupied major trade routes, and there were peace treaties with his name on them. Treaties he'd never signed. Artemis, explain why there are ceasefire agreements bearing my authorization code. Unable to explain, Colonel. Those documents were created approximately 2,800 years after our departure. Your code was classified as lost with the Eternal Wrath. Current theory: Earth government forged diplomatic documents to establish peace. Jake felt his jaw tighten. They'd used his name, his reputation, to make deals with the species that had tried to murder every human in existence. The same species whose bioweapons had killed his wife, his daughter, everyone he'd loved on the colony ship Meridian. How many other ships from our fleet are still active? Unknown. Last contact with the fleet was 3,192 years ago. Probability of survival for the other vessels: less than 2%. Alone, then. The last remnant of humanity's first real war machine, and he'd woken up in a galaxy that had moved on without him. Colonel, immediate attention required. Xinthian fleet is accelerating toward the human research station. They have activated weapons. Estimate 12 minutes until firing range. Jake pulled himself from the pod, muscles protesting every movement. The bridge of the Eternal Wrath stretched before him, eerily pristine after millennia in stasis. Artemis had maintained everything perfectly, waiting for this moment. His combat suit materialized from the wall storage, liquid metal flowing over his body and interfacing with his neural implants. Show me their fleet composition. 47 Xinthian warships appeared on the tactical display, all bearing newer designs than anything in his database. But the formation was identical to the one they'd used at the Battle of Titan, right before they deployed the bioweapon that killed 8 million colonists. They're hunting, Jake whispered. Same pattern, same approach vector. Artemis, what's on that research station? Human scientists conducting quantum field research. Current population, 20 to 3 personnel. Station is unarmed. The old instincts came roaring back. The Xinthians weren't invading. They were testing, prodding at human defenses, looking for weakness in a species they'd once tried to exterminate. Peace treaty or not, predators didn't change their nature. Artemis, calculate firing solution. Target their flagship first, then work down the command chain. I want them to know what's hitting them. Colonel, I must inform you that Earth Command is attempting to establish communication. General Frank Morrison is requesting you stand down. He claims this is a diplomatic incident, not a military one. Jake pulled up the comm channel and saw the general's face, decades older than the young lieutenant he remembered from the academy. Behind Morrison stood politicians, bureaucrats, people who'd built their careers on the peace his disappearance had supposedly enabled. General Morrison, I don't recognize your authority. When I left Earth, you were a first lieutenant. My chain of command ended with President Chen, and unless she's still alive, I answered to mission parameters only. Colonel Harrison, President Chen died 2,000 years ago. The war is over. We have peace. If you fire on that fleet, you'll restart a conflict that could kill billions. Then why are they in attack formation? Why are their weapons hot? Why are they moving on an unarmed research station with the same pattern they used before dropping bioweapons? Morrison's expression flickered. Something like doubt crossed his features. They claim it's a training exercise. Their ambassador swears they mean no harm. Their ambassador swore the same thing right before they killed my family. Right before they killed millions. You want peace, General? Then watch what happens to predators when Earth's protector comes home. Jake cut the connection and nodded to Artemis. Fire. The Eternal Wrath's main cannon had been built using technology humanity found in the ruins of an extinct civilization. When it fired, space itself seemed to scream. The beam crossed 200,000 kilometers in less than a second and struck the Zynthian flagship's shields with enough force to create a micro-singularity. The shield collapsed. The ship's hull vaporized, and the galaxy's carefully maintained peace shattered like glass. Commander Krell watched his fleet's flagship die in a burst of exotic radiation that painted his tactical display in colors his species had no names for. The shockwave that followed sent 3 escort cruisers tumbling through space, their crews scrambling to restore power to failing systems. All ships, evasive pattern delta, return fire, maximum intensity. The Zynthian fleet responded with a coordinated barrage that would have reduced a small moon to debris. Plasma torpedoes, particle beams, and kinetic penetrators all converged on the ancient human vessel's position. Enough firepower to level a continent struck the Eternal Wrath's shields. The shields didn't even flicker. "What in the name of the ancestors is that thing made of?" Krell's tactical officer hissed, all 4 of his manipulator arms dancing across his console. "Our weapons are reading as absorbed, not deflected. It's eating our energy." Jake watched the Zynthian weapons splash harmlessly against his shields, Artemis converting their attack into power for his systems. The technology came from the architects, the long-dead species that had once ruled this region of space. Humanity had found exactly one of their weapons platforms intact, buried in the ice of Europa, and reverse-engineered it to build 7 ships. 7 vessels that could fight entire fleets. And he was the last one awake. "Artemis, target their reactor ships. Leave their command vessels intact. I want them scared, not extinct." Acknowledged. Engaging secondary weapons. The Eternal Wrath's hull opened in 1,000 places, revealing smaller turrets that tracked targets within human precision. Each turret fired beams the width of a pencil, but each beam carried enough concentrated energy to pierce through capital ship armor like it was paper. 12 Zynthian vessels lost power simultaneously, their reactor cores shut down by surgical strikes that bypassed shields entirely. On the research station, Lisa Martinez watched the battle unfold with a mixture of terror and awe. The ancient warship moved through the Zynthian fleet like a dancer, never in the same position twice, its weapons finding targets before they could acquire locks. Within 5 minutes, 23 enemy ships had been disabled without a single casualty. "This is impossible," her assistant, Danny Wright, whispered. "That ship shouldn't exist." The power requirements alone would need a sun to fuel it. Apparently, our ancestors were more creative than we thought. Lisa pulled up every piece of classified information she could access, searching for any reference to Project Sentinel, Project Midnight Sun, anything that explained what they were witnessing. Most of it was redacted, but fragments remained. References to volunteers who'd agreed to sleep until humanity needed them most. References to technology that violated conservation laws. References to one man who'd lost everything and turned his grief into purpose. Colonel Jake Harrison, the ghost of Europa. The man who'd supposedly died fighting the entire Zynthian war fleet 3,000 years ago. Except he hadn't died. He'd been waiting. Jake's fingers flew across his controls, muscle memory from centuries of training guiding his actions. Every Zynthian formation had a weakness, a blind spot in their tactics that came from thinking in 3 dimensions instead of 4. He'd learned that the hard way during the war, watching friends die before understanding how the enemy thought. But he'd learned, and he'd made sure they'd paid for every lesson. "Colonel, Earth Command is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're ordering you to cease fire. Multiple human vessels are en route to intercede. How long until they arrive? 17 hours at maximum military speed." Jake smiled grimly. "More than enough time. Artemis, open a channel to the Zynthian commander. Let's see if these predators remember old prey." Commander Krell's communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission using protocols that predated modern encryption by millennia. Against every instinct, he accepted it. The human face that appeared looked young, maybe 30 in Earth years, but the eyes belonged to someone who'd seen civilizations rise and fall. Scars crossed one cheek, and his expression held no mercy whatsoever. "Commander Krell of the Zynthian Fifth Fleet, my name is Colonel Jake Harrison. 3,000 years ago, your people tried to exterminate mine. They failed because my fleet bought Earth time to hide. They told you we were dead. They lied." Krell's scales rippled with involuntary fear. Every Zynthian child knew the story of the Ghost Fleet, the 7 human ships that had appeared from nowhere and butchered an armada 10 times their size. The story was supposed to be propaganda, a human myth to make themselves feel powerful. "Colonel Harrison, if that's truly who you are, then you must understand that war ended long ago. We have treaties, trade agreements. My people and yours have been at peace for over 2,000 years. Your fleet is in attack formation. Your weapons were armed. You were moving on an unarmed human station using the same tactical approach you used before deploying bioweapons. Explain to me why I shouldn't finish what I started 3 millennia ago and remove your species from this galaxy entirely." The casual tone with which the human spoke about genocide made Krell's blood run cold. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't posturing. This was a man stating facts about his capabilities. "We were conducting authorized military exercises. The formation is standard patrol configuration. We meant no threat." "Then leave. Now. And understand something, Commander. I don't care about your treaties. I don't care about your trade routes. I don't care that Earth has spent 3,000 years learning to play nice with the species that tried to murder us. I've been asleep through all of that, which means I remember exactly what your people are capable of. If I detect even one Zynthian ship within 10 light-years of human space without explicit authorization, I will hunt down every vessel in your fleet and demonstrate why humanity's first war machine was never meant to wake up." Jake cut the transmission and watched as the Zynthian fleet began a hasty retreat, leaving their disabled vessels behind. Around the galaxy, every species monitoring subspace communications heard his message. Earth's lost protector had returned, and he was done being diplomatic. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 3 hours of Jake's transmission. Representatives from 47 species materialized via hologram in the grand chamber orbiting the neutron star sanctuary. 1. The human ambassador, Victoria Grant, stood at her designated position trying to maintain diplomatic composure, while her entire species' reputation crumbled around her. "Ambassador Grant, your species has violated 17 interstellar laws in the last 6 hours. The Krellith Prime Minister's tentacles writhed in agitation, each movement broadcasting distress through the chamber's atmospheric processors. A human vessel has attacked an authorized military fleet, threatened genocide, and claimed sovereign authority over territory governed by mutual treaty. Explain." Victoria wanted to scream. Instead, she pulled up the classified files General Morrison had transmitted during her emergency shuttle flight to Sanctuary 1. Files that detailed Project Midnight Sun. Files that explained exactly what Jake Harrison was, and why every species in the galaxy should be terrified. "Prime Minister, members of the Council, what attacked the Zynthian fleet was not a modern human vessel. It was a weapon. A weapon my species built 3,000 years ago, when we thought we were facing extinction. We believed all 7 ships in the Ghost Fleet were destroyed during the war. We were wrong. The Dravian representative, a massive crystalline entity that communicated through light pulses, flashed a sequence that the translators rendered as skepticism. 1 ship disabled 23 modern warships without sustaining damage. Your species claims this is 3,000-year-old technology. The mathematical improbability of such advancement is irrelevant, Victoria interrupted, breaking every protocol in the book. Because it's not our technology. My ancestors found it. Architect technology, buried in our solar system. They reverse-engineered it into 7 vessels and sent them out with one mission: buy Earth time to survive. Colonel Jake Harrison was the commander of the Eternal Wrath, and according to our records, he's been in stasis since the war ended. His orders were never countermanded. His mission was never concluded. As far as he's concerned, the war is still happening. Silence fell across the chamber. Architect technology was legendary, the remnants of a Type 3 civilization that had disappeared 5 million years ago. Their weapons had reshaped galaxies. Their engines had folded space like paper. Finding intact architect hardware was like discovering a loaded gun pointed at reality itself. You built warships using architect technology and didn't inform the Council? The Xinthian ambassador's voice carried barely controlled rage. That alone is grounds for sanctions, possibly quarantine. My ancestors were watching your fleets prepare to sterilize our colonies, Victoria shot back. They were watching your bioweapons kill millions. Forgive us if we didn't stop to file proper paperwork while fighting for survival. On Earth, General Morrison watched the Council proceedings from his office in New Washington, knowing that the careful peace humanity had built over 3 millennia was collapsing. His aide, Captain Linda Foster, stood at attention beside him, pulling up tactical assessments faster than he could read them. General, the Chinese Federation is mobilizing their defense fleet. The European Union is recalling all vessels from frontier space. Africa Command wants authorization to activate the defense grid. Everyone's preparing for war, sir. Tell them to stand down, all of them. Morrison rubbed his temples, feeling every one of his 73 years. The last thing we need is modern human forces getting between Harrison and whatever he decides is a threat. Our ships are advanced, but nothing compared to what he's flying. Sir, with respect, are we just going to let one man dictate human foreign policy? He's technically a relic, operating on outdated information and prehistoric grudges. Morrison pulled up footage of the battle near Kepler. 442b, watching the Eternal Wrath dance through weapons fire that should have obliterated it. That relic just demonstrated more combat capability than our entire Navy combined. Until we figure out how to communicate with him, we stay out of his way. Jake stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at Earth through the view screen. The planet looked different from his memories. Greener. The atmospheric processors had reversed the climate damage from the pre-war industrial era. The orbital rings that had been under construction when he left now formed complete networks around the equator. Cities of light stretched across the night side, marking a civilization that had thrived while he slept. They'd moved on without him. Built a new world, new alliances, new dreams. And he was a ghost from their violent past, dragging history back into their carefully managed present. Artemis, show me casualty reports from the engagement. 0 fatalities. 23 Xinthian vessels disabled but intact. All crews evacuated to support ships successfully. Estimated repair time for damaged vessels, 3 months. He'd fought to minimize casualties, targeting systems instead of crew compartments. But that wouldn't matter to the politicians. He'd shattered their peace, proven their treaties were built on foundations of fear rather than trust. The Xinthians had retreated not because of law or diplomacy, but because they'd encountered something that could erase them from existence. Colonel, incoming transmission from Earth. General Morrison is requesting another conversation. He's not alone this time. The view screen split to show Morrison's office. Standing beside the general was a woman Jake recognized from old photos, though she'd aged since then. Dr. Helen Zhao, the scientist who'd cracked the architect encryption and made the Ghost Fleet possible. She'd been 25 when the project started. Now she looked past 90, held upright by medical supports. Colonel Harrison, I'm Dr. Zhao. I designed your ship. I remember, Doctor. You told me the Eternal Wrath could fight for 10,000 years without refueling. I'm glad you weren't exaggerating. A sad smile crossed her weathered face. Jake, the galaxy isn't what you remember. The Xinthians aren't what you remember. That bioweapon at Meridian was deployed by a radical faction that's been extinct for 2,000 years. The current government has spent centuries trying to atone for what their ancestors did. They've provided medical research, economic support, even helped terraform Mars for human colonization. They were hunting, Doctor. I saw the formation. You saw a patrol pattern. That's been standard procedure for 70 years. It looks like their old attack configuration because it's based on the same tactical principles. But they weren't attacking. They were protecting the research station from raiders, from pirates that had been hitting human outposts for months. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Show me. The data Dr. Zhao transmitted painted a picture Jake didn't want to believe. 3 months of raids on human research stations, mining operations, and colony transports. Pirates using ships with technology that matched no known species, hitting targets with precision that suggested inside intelligence. 27 attacks, 43 deaths, and the Xinthian fleet had been responding to a distress call when Jake woke up and assumed they were the threat. I made a mistake, Jake said quietly, the words bitter in his mouth. You made a decision based on the information you had, Morrison replied. 3,000 years of context collapsed into 5 minutes of tactical analysis. Anyone would have drawn the same conclusion. That doesn't change the fact that I just crippled the fleet protecting human civilians from actual danger. Jake pulled up the tactical display, studying the pirate attack patterns. Something about them felt familiar, like a half-remembered nightmare. Artemis analyzed these raids. Cross-reference with old war tactics, any species we encountered during the conflict. Processing. Pattern match found. 87% correlation with Kresh Dominion hit-and-run strategies, circa 200 years prior to your stasis. The Kresh. Jake's blood ran cold. A species the architects had supposedly wiped out 50 million years ago for crimes the historical records refused to specify. Humanity had found fragmented warnings in the Europa cache, references to weapons that consumed souls, ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creatures that learned from every species they destroyed. The Kresh are extinct. Doctor, Zhao said, but her voice carried uncertainty. They've been extinct longer than humanity has been sapient. So were the architects, until we found their technology still functioning. Jake began pulling up every piece of information he could access about the Kresh. Most of it was legend, myth, horror stories told to keep young species cautious about experimenting with advanced technology. But every myth had roots in truth. Doctor, what did we find in the Europa cache besides the weapon platform? Her silence told him everything. Doctor, what else was in that cache? A warning, she finally said, written in a language that predated anything we'd seen before. It took 60 years to translate. It said that the architects had imprisoned something in that facility, something they couldn't destroy, something they hoped would sleep until the heat death of the universe. And we took it apart to build weapons. We were desperate, Jake. The Xinthians were days away from deploying bioweapons across 3 colonies. We needed something that could fight back, something that could protect our species. The architect technology was the only option. Jake felt the weight of realization crushing down on him. We didn't find their weapons platform. We found their prison, and we broke it open. Across the galaxy, in a sector marked as uninhabitable by every species, something ancient stirred. The Kresh had never been a single species. They'd been a swarm intelligence, a network of consciousnesses linked across dimensional barriers. The architects had managed to trap one node, one fragment of the greater whole, and bury it in ice on a backwater planet orbiting an unremarkable star. Then humanity found it, studied it, reverse-engineered its technology, and in doing so sent a beacon across dimensions that screamed coordinates to every Kresh consciousness waiting in the dark between realities. They'd been coming for 3,000 years, drawn by the signal, moving through dimensions humanity couldn't perceive. The pirate raids weren't random. They were reconnaissance. Preparation for an invasion that would make the Xinthian attack look like a misunderstanding between neighbors. Artemis, scan beyond normal space. Look for dimensional anomalies, anything that matches architect warning protocols. Scanning. Colonel, I'm detecting 17,462 dimensional breaches within 5 light-years of human core worlds. Energy signatures match corrupted architect technology. They're increasing in intensity. Show me. The hologram that materialized showed space itself tearing apart. Rips in reality that pulsed with malevolent intelligence, each one growing wider as something pushed through from the other side. Jake recognized the energy signature. It matched the core systems of his own ship, the technology humanity had stolen from the architect prison. How long until they breach completely? 4 days, 16 hours at current expansion rate. Lisa Martinez's voice crackled over the emergency channel. Colonel Harrison, we're picking up massive gravitational distortions near the research station. Something's trying to claw its way into our dimension. Our sensors can't make sense of what we're seeing. Jake made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. General Morrison, I need you to transmit every piece of architect data we've collected. Everything we found in the Europa cache. Everything we've discovered since. Send it to the Galactic Council, the Zynthians, every species with functioning quantum computers. That's classified at the highest level. Releasing that information would give every species in the galaxy access to technology that could help them survive what's coming, Jake interrupted. The Kresh are returning and they're coming for the technology we stole. If we don't share what we know, if we don't coordinate defense with every species that has combat capability, we won't have a galaxy left to classify information in. Commander Krell received the human data transmission with shock. The classified files detailed technology that could revolutionize warfare, medicine, energy production, everything. But they also detailed humanity's mistake, the prison they'd accidentally opened, the threat they'd awakened. Fleet Command, this is Commander Krell. I'm requesting immediate deployment of every vessel we have to human space, not as invaders, as allies. Victoria Grant watched species after species commit forces to Earth's defense, former enemies putting aside centuries of mistrust to face a threat that predated them all. The Dravians sent their crystalline dreadnoughts. The Quillith mobilized their biological war forms. Even species that had barely achieved spaceflight offered what little they could. And in the center of it all, an ancient human warship prepared to face the thing his species had accidentally freed. Jake Harrison stood on his bridge, studying the dimensional tiers that grew wider with each passing hour. He'd spent 3,000 years in stasis, dreaming of the moment he'd return home. He just hadn't expected home to need saving from humanity's own mistake. But that was fine. Protecting Earth was what he'd been built for, even if the threat came from the very weapon meant to defend it. Artemis calculate firing solutions for every dimensional breach. Target the architect technology powering them. Maybe we can close what we opened. Colonel, our weapons use the same technology. Firing on the breaches may accelerate their expansion. Jake smiled grimly. Or it might show them we're not easy prey. Either way, when those things come through, I want them to know that humanity doesn't surrender. Not 3,000 years ago. Not today. Not ever. The eternal wrath powered up its weapons, ancient technology humming with stolen power, preparing to face an enemy the architects themselves had feared. And across human space, billions of people looked to the stars and prayed that the protector they'd forgotten would be enough to save them from the nightmare they'd awakened.